For a moment, the most confident man on the planet doubted himself. The legend, the champion, the invincible, standing before the mirror, he saw the fear in his own eyes. But what he did next changed not only his career, it changed the history of sports forever. There was a time when Muhammad Ali seemed unattainable. His voice was thunder, his presence an earthquake. He didn't just fight. He spoke, he taunted, he danced. Every punch was a phrase, every movement poetry. But the world forgets that behind the arrogance lay a man, and men bleed, suffer, and doubt. It was during one of the darkest phases of his life that Ali found himself facing something he had never imagined, the feeling of being powerless. Fame had exhausted him, politics had isolated him, and his own strength, which had once seemed infinite, was beginning to falter. By that time, Ali was no longer just a boxer. He was a symbol, a target, a voice, and at the same time, silence. His muscles still reacted, but his mind trembled. His return to the ring, after years of suspension, would not be just a fight against an opponent. It would be against doubt itself. And this fight is one no one sees, no one applauds, no one celebrates. Because it happens in the dark, when the world sleeps and the champion stares into the mirror, wondering if he is still the same. The video you're about to watch isn't about titles or belts. It's about a moment that nearly broke him and, paradoxically, made him eternal. The night Muhammad Ali doubted himself, and the morning that doubt turned into strength. It was 1971. The city of Miami slept to the distant sound of waves crashing against the docks. But inside a hotel room, the silence was absolute. Muhammad Ali sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the hands that had once seemed invincible. They were the same hands that had destroyed Sonny Liston, that had roused crowds, that had declared to the world, "I am the greatest," and everyone believed him. But now those hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from something he had never admitted to feeling: fear. It had been 3 years since he'd been banned for boxing. 3 years away from the ring, from glory, from the roar of the crowd. 3 years being called a traitor, a coward, an enemy of America for refusing to fight in Vietnam. Fame became a burden, and certainty became doubt. He always said he feared no one, but that night, the enemy was within him. What if I'm not the same anymore, he thought. What if time has defeated me? The mirror before the bed reflected a man who still seemed strong, but his eyes betrayed the weight of loneliness. That early morning, Ali walked to the window. The city was quiet, and for the first time, so was he. He closed his eyes and listened to the echo of voices from the past, the public chanting his name, the journalists mocking him, the government calling him a deserter. He took a deep breath, but the air felt heavy, almost impossible to draw. "Maybe they're right," he murmured. The sentence sounded like a forbidden confession. Ali, the man who claimed to be king of the world, was doubting his own crown. But then something changed. Amidst the silence, he remembered the words he had spoken years before. "If you dream of being king, act like one." Slowly he stood. He walked to the mirror, stared at his reflection, and whispered, "They took my title, but not my spirit." The words seemed fragile, but little by little, they became a mantra. There he began to repeat them, ever louder, ever more convinced. "I am the greatest. I am the greatest." It was almost a scream, an exorcism, an invisible struggle between man and fear. That night, he wasn't facing Joe Frazier. He was facing something far more cruel: uncertainty. His body no longer responded as quickly as it had. His reflexes seemed slow, and age was taking its toll. But it was there, alone in that room, that the new Ali was born. Not the loudmouth, not the idol, but the man who would learn to fight with what remained: faith. As the sun began to rise, he was still standing in front of the mirror, sweaty, exhausted, but his eyes were shining again. The fear was still there, but now tamed, transformed into fuel. It was the beginning of an internal war that would last months, perhaps years. But in that moment, something became clear. He still had the same fire inside. And as the morning light streamed through the window, Muhammad Ali smiled. A small, tired smile, but genuine. "They think they've got me down," he said softly, "but I haven't even started fighting yet." From then on, every workout, every drop of sweat, every punch on the punching bag would be a way to rebuild not just his body, but his soul. Because to become champion again, he first needed to defeat the enemy within. And on that silent night, the greatest of all time discovered something that would forever change the way he fought. Fear can also be a weapon. The days that followed were long, hard, and lonely. The clock seemed to mock him, ticking away with a dry sound that echoed off the walls of the empty gym. Muhammad Ali had returned to training, but his body no longer responded as it once had. His muscles were heavy, his reflexes slow, and each blow to the heavy bag felt like another attempt to silence the voices inside his own head. He knew the world was watching him, that many wanted to see him fail, that the same people who had called him a hero now branded him a finished man. And for a moment, he believed it. The cameras followed him again. Journalists invaded his space, ready to record the fall of an idol. Ali has lost his shine, they said. 3 years out of the ring is an eternity. He listened silently, but inside him, a flame began to reignite. It was a mixture of anger and pride. When trainer Angelo Dundee saw him hesitate during training, he slowly approached and said, "You're still the greatest, but you need to remember why." Ali simply lowered his head, sweat streaming down his face, mixed with tears he would never admit to shedding. Each morning began with the same ritual. He arrived before everyone else, silenced the world, and heard only the sound of his own footsteps on the gym floor. "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee," he repeated softly, as if reciting a forgotten prayer. His body responded, little by little. His speed returned. His gaze hardened. But something was different. Now, he wasn't fighting for applause. He was fighting to prove to himself that he could still be Ali. The night before his fight with Joe Frazier, he didn't sleep. He paced his room, listening to the imaginary roars of the crowd, feeling the muffled sound of punches in his head. Frazier was younger, stronger, faster. The press called him the new king, and Ali knew that if he lost, the whole world would confirm what he feared most. That time had defeated him. "I can't lose," he murmured. "Not for them, but for me." Morning arrived, and with it, the fight that would be called the fight of the century. The lights of Madison Square Garden burned like suns, and the crowd roared. Ali stepped into the ring, his heart pounding like a drum. In the corner, Frazier watched him like a predator ready to pounce. When the bell rang, Ali realized the fear was still there, but he had learned to fight with it. The first few rounds were brutal. Frazier hit him hard, each blow like thunder. Ali's body trembled, but his mind screamed, "Stay on your feet. Don't give up." With every punch, he remembered the lonely nights, the headlines calling him a traitor, the doors that had closed. This fight was more than boxing. It was redemption. It was a man trying to prove that the spirit is stronger than time. The 15th round arrived. Frazier caught him with a devastating hook to the jaw, and Ali went down. For a few seconds, everything was silent. The audience held its breath. He stared at the ceiling, his body heavy, his pride wounded. He could give up. He could accept the end. But inside him, a voice roared, the same one that had been with him since he was a boy. "Get up. The gods have no respect for those who surrender." Ali got up, staggering, injured but standing. The crowd erupted. And even though he was defeated on points that night, he had overcome what really mattered, the fear of no longer being himself. He limped out of the ring, his face swollen but smiling. When a reporter approached him and asked if he still considered himself the greatest, he replied with a calm look, "I'm the greatest because I fell and got up." In that defeat, he found his voice again. Arrogance gave way to wisdom. The showman became a warrior. And the man who once doubted himself began to understand that true greatness lies not in never falling, but in having the courage to rise up in the face of millions who expect otherwise. If you believe me, comment now. Ali never really fell. Like, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with anyone who needs a reminder that fear can also be overcome. The post-defeat silence was deafening. The whole world seemed to watch Muhammad Ali with a mixture of pity and contempt. The headlines were cruel. The king has fallen. Ali isn't the same. Time has beaten him. And for a moment, he believed them. His swollen face and bruises still hurt, but what really hurt was the emptiness. The lights at Madison Square Garden had gone out, and all that remained was the echo of a crowd that had chanted his name, and now fell silent. He looked in the mirror, remembering the invincible youth who had promised to be eternal, and saw an ordinary man, aged, with the marks of life etched on his skin. But deep down, a small flame insisted on burning, and that flame, he knew, could still set the world ablaze. In the following months, Ali isolated himself. Hardly anyone saw him. Hardly anyone heard him. But those who knew him knew something was being forged there, silently. He returned to training with almost superhuman intensity. He ran before sunrise, his body aching and the wind biting his face. He repeated the same punch 1,000 times, the same step 1,000 times, the same dodge 1,000 times. Each movement was a confession that he still had a score to settle with destiny. Frazier beat me, but he didn't defeat me, he muttered, sweating to the ground. His coach, Angelo Dundee, watched him apprehensively. Ali, you're punishing yourself. And he, without looking back, replied, No, I'm rebuilding myself. The difference was subtle, but decisive. Ali wasn't seeking revenge. He was seeking transcendence. He wanted to prove to the world and to himself that greatness isn't measured by belts, but by the ability to endure pain and keep moving forward. Every punch he threw at the heavy bag was a dialogue with the past. This is for every doubt. Bang. This is for every criticism. Bang. This is for me. Bang. The training sessions became legendary. One morning, reporters tried to interview him, but he just smiled. You want headlines, he said, but I want redemption. It was at this point that arrogance gave way to serenity. The man who once said, I'm the greatest, now spoke softly with a different conviction. I'm the one who still stands. This new version of Ali impressed even his opponents. He trained with young boxers, allowed himself to be hit, tested his own endurance, and in the end, smiled. Pain teaches me what victory cannot. As the months passed, his physical form returned, but something greater was transforming within him, his mind. He studied his opponents with the patience of a strategist. He observed every move, every pattern. The arrogance that had once blinded him gave way to calculated intelligence. He began to create what he would call rope-a-dope, the strategy that would make him immortal. Instead of fighting his opponent, he would learn to let him wear himself down, to tire him, to make him fight against his own exhaustion. It was a psychological game, not just a physical one. Sometimes, to win, you have to appear to be losing, he would say with an enigmatic smile. The press didn't understand. They said Ali was finished, that his reflexes were too slow, that age had caught up with him. But what no one realized was that he was preparing something bigger, a return not just to the top, but to eternity. In a quick interview, a reporter asked, Ali, what are you going to do now? He replied, with that old glint in his eye, I'm going to prove that the impossible only exists until someone decides to face it. Deep down, he knew it wasn't enough to just fight again. He needed something to symbolize his resurrection, something to test his courage. It was then that he heard a name that echoed like thunder, George Foreman. A muscular monster, young, undefeated, who destroyed his opponents with the ease of someone smashing glass. Foreman didn't just win, he crushed. And the whole world knew no one would dare face him. No one except Ali. His managers tried to convince him to give up. You'll die in the ring, they said. He's younger, stronger, faster. But Ali smiled. He may be all of those things. But he's not me. This phrase circulated around the world, and the challenge was thrown down. The fight would take place in an exotic, distant, mysterious place, Zaire, in Africa. The whole world would turn its eyes there. And for the first time in a long time, people would see not just a boxer, but a man reborn in the face of his own fears. As he boarded a plane for Africa, Muhammad Ali looked out the plane window and whispered, Let them come in strong, because now the fire has returned. And so, in the heart of a continent that would welcome him like a king, the most epic battle in boxing history began to unfold. Not just a fight for titles, but for the soul of Muhammad Ali himself. The heat in Zaire was suffocating, almost spiritual. The air seemed to vibrate with the anticipation of millions. When Muhammad Ali landed in Kinshasa, the streets were packed. Men, women, and children chanted his name as if it were a sacred chant. Ali Bomayi. Ali, kill him. It was more than cheering. It was adoration. For the first time in a long time, he felt something that didn't come from the headlines or the spotlight. It came from the people. Africa welcomed him not as a fighter, but as a returning son. He walked among the people, touched the hands of children, smiled. "I'm home," he said. And for a few days, the fear that had accompanied him dissolved into the red dust of the African streets. But the opponent awaiting him was no ordinary one. George Foreman was a force of nature. Young, 25, an undefeated champion. His every blow was compared to the impact of a hammer. He had destroyed Joe Frazier in just 2 rounds. The world believed Ali stood no chance. Experts said his body wouldn't hold up, that his age and time away from the ring would take their toll. "You're going to get murdered in there," warned a reporter. But Ali just laughed. "Murdered? Maybe. But at least they'll know I fought like a man." During training in Kinshasa, the scene was almost surreal. Under the blazing sun, Ali ran between villages, surrounded by crowds following him, shouting the same chant that would echo forever in history. Ali Bomayi. The sound reverberated through the hills, bouncing off the walls of the stadium still under construction. Sometimes he would stop, raise his fists, and shout back, "I am the people. I am the voice of the unheard." That energy fueled something inside him. Fear transformed into faith, and faith into destiny. In the locker room before the fight, silence returned. He sat there, his gloves on his lap, his eyes fixed on the ground. The roar of the crowd sounded distant, muffled. His body seemed calm, but his heart beat with a warlike rhythm. Angelo Dundee approached and asked, "Are you ready?" He looked up and replied calmly, "I was born ready. I was just waiting for the right day." Dundee nodded, but he knew that night would be more than boxing. It would be the night history met myth. When Ali stepped into the ring, the white lights of the 20 de Mayo stadium enveloped him like a halo. Foreman entered soon after, imposing, solid, with a serious face, his muscles glistening with sweat. The bell sounded, and the world held its breath. Foreman attacked with fury from the first second. His blows were heavy, violent, relentless. The sound of the punches echoed like thunder through Ali's body. Each blow made the crowd shudder. But Ali, surprisingly, didn't react. He leaned against the ropes, covered his face, and let Foreman attack. The crowd was confused. The commentators thought he was losing. "He's gone crazy," they shouted. But there was a plan. The rope-a-dope was beginning to reveal itself. Ali let the young champion expend all his energy in the early rounds. With each blow he took, he whispered something to Foreman. "Is that all you've got? You'll get tired, kid. I can take more than you think." It was provocation, it was psychology. Foreman, furious, increased the force of his punches and became increasingly exhausted. By the 4th round, Ali had already noticed the pattern. He could feel his opponent's gloves losing weight, his movements slowing. Inside, a fire was growing. Every breath was measured, every look calculated. In the 6th, he began to counterattack. Jab, right dodge. The crowd went wild. "Ali Bomayi!" roared the stadium. Foreman tried to react, but his body no longer obeyed. The giant began to dissolve before his eyes. In the 8th round, fate struck. Foreman threw a slow, heavy punch, and Ali responded with a perfect sequence. Right, left, right, each like a final sentence. The undefeated champion's body slowly slumped like a crumbling wall. The entire stadium erupted. The referee counted to 10. Foreman didn't get up. Muhammad Ali, against all odds, against time, against doubt, was back on his feet, world champion. He didn't shout. He didn't dance. He didn't celebrate arrogantly. He just raised his arms, looking up at the African sky, sweat mixed with tears. It was as if he were speaking to God, to the past, to the boy from Louisville who once promised to be the greatest. "I'm back," he murmured, "and this time to stay." The crowd surged into the stadium, carrying him on their shoulders. The chant echoed through the night. "Ali Bomiyi! Ali Bomiyi!" And as the flashbulbs illuminated his weary face, he understood that he hadn't just won a fight. He had won himself. The fear that had once paralyzed him was now dead. The man who doubted himself had proven to the world that true strength is born when all seems lost. That night, under the African sky, Muhammad Ali wasn't just the greatest boxer in the world. He was a living symbol of what humanity can become when it decides to face the impossible. After his victory in Zaire, the world once again bowed before Muhammad Ali. The streets, the newspapers, people's eyes, everything breathed his name. It was the return of the king, the rebirth of the myth, the man who proved that the impossible could bleed. But deep down, he knew something had changed. His body no longer responded as before. Each training session exacted its toll. Each fight left deeper scars. Still, Ali kept going, not out of vanity, but because he believed his destiny went beyond boxing. He was now a voice, a symbol, a living legend. And legends, he knew, have no right to stop. The mornings following the conquest were silent. He would wake before the sun, walk to the balcony, and gaze at the horizon. The warm African wind still seemed to blow through his memory. But when he touched his face, he felt the scars, memories etched in his flesh. Being the greatest has a price, he told himself, and that price was beginning to be exacted. His hands shook more than before, his speech sometimes faltered, his body felt heavy. But even so, he stood. "There's still something I need to prove." In the years that followed, Ali continued fighting. He faced new champions, new styles, new dangers. And even when his body screamed for him to stop, his spirit wouldn't obey. He believed that every time he stepped into the ring, he represented not just himself, but millions of people who saw in him the hope of resistance. For many, he no longer needed to prove anything. But for him, the fight was bigger than titles. It was about showing that courage is the last thing lost when all else fails. Time, however, is an adversary no one can defeat. Slowly, the speed that had made him legendary began to fade. His dodges became slower, his blows heavier. But something was growing within him, a wisdom that only comes after losing and finding yourself again so many times. He began to talk less and inspire more. His interviews were no longer about boxing, but about faith, dignity, and humanity. "I fought men," he would say, "but the biggest fight was always with myself." When he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, the world fell silent. It seemed cruel. The man who lived by strength and words would now be limited in body and voice. But Ali reacted as he always had to pain, with grace, courage, and humor. "God gave me Parkinson's to remind me that I'm not the center of the universe," he once said, smiling. The disease weakened him, but it also made him even more human. He began to travel the world, meeting children, leaders, and ordinary people. In each place, he left the same message: don't count the days. Make the days count. During the 1980s and 1990s, he was already more myth than man. His body trembled, but his eyes still shone. At events, crowds continued to give him a standing ovation. And when he lit the Olympic torch in 1996, his hands trembling and his gaze serene, the whole world wept. Not out of pity, but out of recognition. This wasn't the same arrogant young man who claimed to be the greatest. He was a warrior who discovered that true greatness is born of humility. In the final years of his life, Ali lived in silence. The voice that once echoed like thunder was now a whisper. But within him, there was still fire. He was once asked if he regretted anything. He replied, "Maybe not having loved more. But I learned that even love is a form of struggle, and I fought with everything I had." His home was filled with photos, trophies, and mementos, but what he was most proud of wasn't the gold, but his legacy. "People will forget how many fights I won," he would say, "but they will never forget what I represented." When the end came, He was surrounded by his family, at peace. The man who once faced kings, governments, and his own demons now rested. And even there, between sighs and memories, he seemed to still be fighting, not against death, but to keep inspiring. Because Muhammad Ali was never just a boxer. He was a living reminder that doubt is part of courage, that failure is part of victory, and that even the greatest of all time once needed to believe in himself again. And so, as the world said goodbye, the words that echoed in his youth resounded again, not as arrogance, but as eternal truth. I am the greatest, because I faced fear and I did not let it overcome me. Muhammad Ali proved that a man's strength lies not in his fists, but in his ability to keep fighting even when his body gives up and his spirit insists on standing.